Cadets underestimated her from the start, and it showed in every small moment leading up to the shove in the dirt. It was the way they looked past her in formation, as if her presence barely registered. It was the way they spoke louder around her, like volume alone proved superiority. It was the quick smirks passed between them when she asked a question or adjusted her gear. They treated her like a soft spot in a hard place, someone who slipped in through a crack they believe should never have existed. They did not see discipline in her silence. They saw weakness. They mistook calm for inexperience. They assumed that anyone who stood still could not possibly know more, endure more, or carry more than they did. Their confidence fed on their own reflection and left no space for the possibility that someone quieter than them might be stronger. From day one she noticed it. She caught the glances, the whispers, the assumptions sitting right under the surface. She kept her reactions measured. She had learned long ago that proving yourself to someone who has already decided not to see you is wasted energy. She had no interest in playing into their expectations, no interest in puffing up her chest to match their noise. She had a different mission. Blend in, observe, learn the culture before challenging it. She had faced enough battles to know that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most capable, but is often the first to underestimate someone else. They treated her as if she had stumbled into their world, when in truth she had already walked through worlds far harsher and survived them. Their underestimation did not sit on one moment. It built layer by layer. During drills they would move around her, not with her. During training runs they would surge ahead, then slow down just enough to let her catch up, pretending they did not notice her breathing was steady while theirs wavered. They believed they were showing dominance. She saw rookies trying to impress each other. They assumed age meant limitation. They assumed gender meant fragility. They assumed a quiet presence meant an empty resume. They were so sure of their assumptions that they never questioned why she never complained, never lagged, and never asked for special treatment. They never paused long enough to consider that someone who blends into the background might be doing it on purpose. She watched them posture, watched them compare muscles, watched them fight small battles for status that meant nothing in the real world. They carried themselves like they had already tasted victory, when in truth they had barely scratched the surface of what real discipline required. She saw herself in them, but only the version of herself from early years, the version that learned the hard way what strength truly meant. She understood their mindset. She also understood how dangerous it could be when it went unchecked. Every training session revealed another crack in their perception. They mistook her endurance for luck. They mistook her precision for coincidence. They mistook her patience for fear. They never asked why she never broke form. They never asked why she never hesitated. They never asked why she seemed to know exactly how to conserve her energy, when to push, and when to hold back. They wrote a story about her without ever speaking to her. It was easier for them to believe she was untested than to imagine they were the ones being tested. They expected her to prove herself to them, but she had already done her proving in places where proving yourself mattered. Places where one mistake meant loss, not embarrassment. Places where leadership was silent, steady, and earned through actions that no one here would ever fully comprehend. She had learned to read people quickly, to understand how pride could cloud judgment, and how ego could turn simple tasks into unnecessary battles. Watching the cadets, she saw all of it play out in front of her like a familiar script. She carried herself with a level of control that made them uneasy. They did not understand it, so they diminished it. They tried to push her into reacting, because reaction was the only language they respected. But she refused to give them that satisfaction. She did not need to respond to every slight. She did not need to assert power in loud ways. Her power had already been tested in the only environments that mattered. Their assumptions could not touch her. Their misjudgment could not shake her. Their arrogance only confirmed how little they knew about real strength. The more they underestimated her, the more they revealed about themselves. Their behavior said nothing about her ability and everything about their inexperience. They held tightly to the idea that superiority came from appearance. They never considered that experience moves quietly and confidence built on real hardship does not need to shout. They had created a version of her in their minds that fit their comfort zone, and they were determined to treat her according to that version. They believed they understood her. They believed they had her figured out. They believed the story they wrote about her was the truth. They had no idea how wrong they were. The shove exposed their arrogance, not her weakness, and that truth was clear from the instant it happened. The push itself was nothing special. It was the kind of careless, thoughtless move someone makes when they believe the person in front of them will not push back. It was a show of dominance done in front of the others, a way to score an easy point in their unspoken competition for who carried the most swagger. They did not plan it. They did not think it through. It came from impulse, fueled by a belief that they were untouchable and she was insignificant. That belief was the real problem. The shove did not reveal a lack of strength in her. It revealed a lack of discipline in them. The moment she hit the dirt, the yard shifted. Not because she fell, but because the cadets around them realized what had just happened. Some laughed under their breath, thinking it was all part of the routine. Some looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to step in. Some leaned forward as if waiting to see whether she would cry, complain, or snap. Their reactions painted the entire picture. This was less about physical force and more about the mindset that allowed it. They had trained long enough to know the rules. They knew respect was not optional. They knew every movement in that yard mattered. Yet they chose to ignore all of it because they believed the moment was theirs to control. She felt the impact. But what struck harder was the clarity of their intent. They did not shove her to test her capabilities. They shoved her to tell a story they had already decided was true. In their minds, she did not belong on equal footing with them. They wanted to reinforce that idea, not through skill or achievement, but through something as cheap as knocking someone down. It was the kind of behavior that exposed how shallow their confidence really was. Someone secure in their strength does not need to humiliate others. Someone secure in their leadership does not need to use force to elevate themselves. Their arrogance was laid bare in a single motion. She had been pushed before, in ways far more brutal, far more personal, and far more dangerous. She had been thrown to the ground in situations where the only outcome that mattered was survival. Compared to that, a cadet's shove was barely noise. But she paid attention not to the fall, but to the intent behind it. She evaluated their posture, their eyes, the way they shifted their weight afterward as if bracing for either applause or trouble. Their body language told her everything she needed to know. They thought they had made their point. They thought they had asserted dominance. They thought she would accept it because they believed she had no choice. She stayed on the ground for an extra second, not because she was hurt, but because she wanted to see how they reacted to stillness. Arrogance thrives on reaction. It expects anger, fear, or retreat. When none appear, it begins to crack. She saw that crack forming as their smirks faded and their confidence wavered. The cadet who pushed her shifted his stance, unsure of how to read her lack of response. It was the first moment all day in which his certainty slipped. He had acted on impulse, but now he was trapped in the silence that followed. When she rose, she did not rise fast or dramatic. She rose with slow, controlled movement that showed she was not shaken. That simple choice told a different story than the one the cadets had tried to write. It was not a story of someone defeated. It was a story of someone evaluating, someone calculating, someone who refused to be defined by someone else's arrogance. She dusted off her uniform without rushing. Every second of composure undercut the push that was meant to diminish her. Every breath she took reminded them that their attempt to corner her had only revealed their own lack of control. Their arrogance was not just in the shove. It was in the belief that they could get away with it. It was in the assumption that the instructors would overlook it. It was in the idea that their rank as cadets gave them freedom to treat others however they wished. That mindset did not come from strength. It came from immaturity. True discipline requires understanding where the line is, and they had crossed it without hesitation. Not because they were brave, but because they were blind to the consequences of their actions. As she stood tall again, the yard did not look the same to them. The shove had not weakened her. It had weakened their credibility. It had exposed their inability to control their ego. It had shown that instead of training to become leaders, they were slipping into the habit of dragging others down to make themselves feel higher. Their arrogance, once hidden behind loud voices and forced confidence, now sat in the open with nowhere to hide. The shove did not break her rhythm. It broke their illusion. She revealed her Navy SEAL background only when pushed, and it happened in a way none of them expected. She did not walk into the base announcing her record. She did not flash her credentials or tell stories about deployments. She arrived like anyone else, carrying standard gear, following protocol, blending into the rhythm of the place without drawing attention. She understood the value of staying low profile, not because she wanted to hide, but because she wanted to see how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. Experience had taught her that true character comes out when power feels one-sided. So she let them believe what they wanted to believe. She let them underestimate her. She let them misjudge her background, her ability, and her purpose. She gave them room to reveal who they truly were before she revealed anything about herself. When the shove happened and the yard went tense, she realized they had crossed the line that separated immaturity from disrespect. She did not owe them her story. She did not owe them her history. But she understood the environment. A place built on hierarchy and training sometimes needed a hard reset to remind people what respect looks like. She did not rise with anger. She rose with clarity. The moment she brushed dirt off her shoulder, she weighed the options. Keep observing, or break the illusion they had wrapped around her and force them to see her as she actually was. She chose the second path, not to boast, but because continuing in silence would only enable their arrogance. The cadets stood around her expecting any reaction except the one she gave. They expected her to shrink. They expected her to complain. They expected her to lash out. They did not expect calm. They did not expect poise. They did not expect the controlled tone that came when she finally opened her mouth and asked the lead cadet a simple question about protocol, one he should have known by heart. The question cut through their noise. It was the kind of question someone asks when they are not new to the system, when they understand the rules so well they can pinpoint the exact rule being broken without thinking twice. The cadets exchanged quick glances. Confusion crept in. Her voice carried the weight of experience, but they did not know where that experience came from yet. The instructor on the far end of the yard noticed the tension and walked over. He had seen enough training days to know when something had gone wrong. He asked what happened, and before the cadets could speak over each other, she gave a clear, concise account. No embellishment, no blame, just facts. Her delivery was too sharp, too structured, too military for someone who had supposedly never served. The instructor recognized it instantly. He studied her face for a moment, then asked the question the cadets had never thought to ask. He asked her where she trained before arriving here. The yard fell silent. She did not drag out the answer. She spoke plainly, the same way she had learned to speak during missions where clarity meant survival. She told him she had served as a Navy SEAL combat operator, part of a classified element that did not publicize its roster. She had completed deployments the cadets could not imagine. She had operated in environments far beyond anything they would see in training. She listed none of the details that were off-limits, but the title alone carried more weight than any bragging ever could. The instructor nodded in immediate understanding. The cadets froze. The reaction from the group was split, but predictable. Some stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, shocked that they had ignored every sign that something about her was different. Some looked down, embarrassed that they had treated a decorated veteran like a rookie. The one who shoved her turned pale. His smirk vanished. He realized he had not pushed a quiet cadet. He had pushed someone who had already endured more than he could comprehend. Someone who had trained under standards far stricter than anything he had faced. Someone who had fought real enemies, not ego battles in a yard. She did not use her background as a threat. She did not raise her voice. Her revelation was not about proving superiority. It was about setting the record straight so the environment could reset. She knew that respect built on lies or assumptions collapses fast. Respect built on truth holds. Her truth changed the dynamic instantly. It forced the cadets to confront the gap between what they thought they understood and what was real. It exposed how their treatment of her had never been based on ability, but on their own insecurities. It showed them that the person they had dismissed without a second thought was someone who had earned respect long before stepping foot on this base. Her reveal did not elevate her. It exposed them. Respect must be earned and given, regardless of rank or gender, and that truth sat at the center of everything that unfolded after the shove. The cadets had built a hierarchy in their minds based on appearances, assumptions, and the loudness of their own confidence. They believed respect flowed one way, from the bottom to the top, from the quiet to the loud, from the new to the seasoned. They believed they were already positioned above her simply because they arrived with a shared identity and she arrived alone. None of that had anything to do with real respect. Real respect comes from consistency, character, discipline, and the way a person carries themselves when no one is watching. She understood that long before she stepped foot on that training ground. They had not learned it yet, and that gap showed in every careless decision they made. When she revealed her background, the yard shifted again, but the shift was not about fear. It was about the sudden realization that their entire approach to her had been rooted in something flimsy. They had offered respect selectively, and they had done it based on ego, not principle. They respected those who matched their energy, those who spoke loudly, those who swaggered through drills like they had already earned their place. They respected titles and uniforms more than the people wearing them. They respected the image of strength, not strength itself. It was a shallow system, and moments like this exposed its cracks. She had spent years operating in environments where respect was non-negotiable because lives depended on it. In that world, no one cared about gender. No one cared about who talked louder. No one cared who looked tougher during warm-ups. Respect there came from performance under pressure, from trust earned through shared hardship, from knowing the person next to you would hold the line when things went wrong. It was a kind of respect the cadets had not experienced yet. They had confused intimidation with authority and dominance with leadership. She saw it clearly. They did not understand the weight of the values they were supposed to be developing. After the reveal, she watched their faces shift through stages of realization. Some were embarrassed, not because they had treated a SEAL poorly, but because they had treated a fellow human poorly. Those cadets understood the lesson quickly. Others struggled with it. Their pride pushed back. They wanted to believe their behavior had been justified, that they had only been participating in rough training culture. But even that excuse crumbled under the truth. They knew the difference between rigorous training and unnecessary disrespect. They chose disrespect because they thought they could get away with it. The instructor's presence made the moment sharper. He did not need to lecture them. His silence alone carried weight. He had trained enough cadets to recognize the difference between confidence and arrogance. He saw exactly how they had treated her. He saw how their behavior contradicted the standards they claimed to uphold. He did not need to say much for them to grasp that respect is supposed to move in both directions, not just upward. You give it and earn it at the same time, through how you act, how you support your team, and how you hold yourself accountable. She stood calmly while they processed it. She did not demand apologies. She did not bask in the shock. She did not use the moment to elevate herself. That restraint reinforced the lesson even more. Her strength did not need theatrics. Her experience did not need validation. She operated on principles, not performances. The cadets saw that and felt the difference between forced respect and real respect. Forced respect comes from fear of consequences. Real respect comes from recognizing someone's character, their patience, their self-control. What unsettled some of them most was the idea that she had given them a fair chance from the start. She had not walked in expecting special treatment. She had not expected reverence. She expected the same baseline level of human respect that everyone deserves. They failed at that before they even knew who she was. That realization hit deeper than any disciplinary action could. It showed them that they had made themselves smaller, not her. Their behavior had revealed more about them than about her. The moment became a turning point because it stripped away the excuses. If respect depends on someone's title, then it is not respect at all. If it depends on gender, then it is prejudice. If it depends on strength alone, then it is fear disguised as admiration. The cadets had to confront the truth that the foundation of their behavior had been faulty. She, on the other hand, had shown them what respect looks like when it is built on integrity. She treated everyone the same, even while others failed to do the same for her. As the yard settled and training resumed, The air felt different. The cadets moved with more awareness, not because they were afraid of her, but because they understood something they had overlooked. Respect is not passive. It is active. It requires discipline, accountability, and the humility to recognize value in someone before you know their story. It demands that people look beyond the surface, beyond assumptions, beyond ego. They had learned that lesson the hard way, and she watched them adjust, not with satisfaction, but with the quiet acknowledgement that growth often starts with discomfort. Real strength is quiet until it needs to speak, and she embodied that truth from the moment she stepped onto the base. She did not move with the swagger the cadets wore like armor. She did not try to command attention. She did not tell anyone who she was or what she had done. Her strength lived in silence, in the way she observed the room before engaging, in the way she held herself steady through every drill without showing strain. That kind of strength unsettles people who rely on volume to feel powerful. They could not read her, so they filled the gaps with assumptions. They mistook silence for softness because they had never seen strength that did not advertise itself. They did not understand the kind of confidence that does not need an audience. She had learned long ago that real power does not flare up at every challenge. It does not bark orders just to be heard. It waits. It calculates. It shows up when needed and disappears when the job is done. Years of high-stakes missions had taught her that quiet is not weakness, it is control. When you are in environments where noise attracts danger, stillness becomes a skill. When you work in teams where every small decision carries consequences, speaking only when it matters becomes second nature. That mindset did not fade after she left the battlefield. It followed her into every room, every training ground, every interaction. The cadets saw none of the history behind her silence. They only saw what they wanted to see. Her quiet presence made some of them uneasy, not because she tried to intimidate anyone, but because confidence that does not perform is hard to measure. They preferred people who spoke loudly, people who announced their intentions, people who projected boldness. It gave them something to compare themselves to. With her, they had no comparison. She did everything well, but without the fanfare they expected from someone competent. She completed drills without complaint. She executed tasks with precision. She followed instructions exactly. She never rushed to show off. She never needed to. Her strength had been tested in places that required more than muscle. It required endurance, restraint, and the ability to stay composed when everything around you fell apart. The cadets assumed that if she were truly strong, she would have asserted herself earlier. They thought strength meant stepping forward, demanding authority, making noise. They did not understand that she had no interest in proving anything to people who had not earned her trust. She believed in letting actions speak, even if those actions went unnoticed. She believed in patience, in reading the room before making a move. She believed that strength should never be used for ego. It should be used for purpose. That mindset put her on a different wavelength from the rest of them. They operated from pride. She operated from discipline. When the shove came, her quiet strength shifted. It did not explode outward. It simply rose to the surface. For the first time, they saw something beyond her calm exterior, not because she became loud, but because she became even more controlled. There is a certain kind of power in someone who can take a hit, pause, and decide their next move with clarity instead of emotion. Her silence in that moment was louder than any confrontation. It showed she was not shaken. It showed she was not intimidated. It showed she had been through worse and learned how to stay centered no matter what. Her quiet strength also showed in the way she handled the aftermath. She did not accuse. She did not rant. She did not make the moment bigger than it needed to be. She spoke only when necessary, and each word carried weight because it came from a place of intention rather than impulse. The cadets were used to scrambling for control through noise. She gained control through presence. That difference forced them to reevaluate what strength actually looks like. Some of the cadets struggled with that realization. They had built their identities around external displays of toughness. They thought loud commands and aggressive posture equaled power. Seeing someone who carried strength without theatrics challenged their entire understanding of leadership. It made them confront the possibility that confidence rooted in posturing collapses under pressure, while confidence rooted in discipline stays solid. They could not ignore how she moved with purpose, how she kept her composure, how she never wasted energy trying to prove who she was. As training continued, her quiet strength became something they could no longer dismiss. They watched how she handled long drills without losing form. They watched how she treated everyone with the same level of respect. They watched how she never rushed to judgment. The more they observed, the more they understood that strength like hers does not need to announce itself because it is already undeniable. It stands firm. It endures. It waits for the moment when action is required and then delivers with precision. Real strength rarely shouts. It simply stands, steady and undeniable, until the moment it chooses to speak. Leadership is defined by character, not intimidation, and she proved that long before anyone knew who she was. From the first day, she carried herself in a way that set a quiet standard. She showed up early, prepared, and focused. She listened more than she spoke. She watched how people treated each other, how they handled stress, and how they responded to obstacles. She never tried to take control of a room through fear or force. She let her consistency speak for her. That alone separated her from many of the cadets who still believed that leadership meant standing taller, talking louder, and taking up as much space as possible. Their version of leadership was built on appearance. Hers was built on integrity. Intimidation had become the default language for some of the cadets. They swaggered through drills, snapped at anyone who moved too slowly, and tried to establish authority by pushing others down instead of lifting themselves up. They thought ordering people around made them leaders. They thought scaring weaker cadets made them strong. They wore their bravado like a uniform, convinced it earned them respect. But respect gained through fear is fragile. It dissolves the moment fear loses its power. They had not learned that yet. She had learned it through years of real-world stakes, where intimidation fails fast and character is the only thing that keeps a team together. She demonstrated leadership in small, consistent choices that went unnoticed at first. She helped newer cadets with their gear without making a show of it. She corrected mistakes quietly without belittling anyone. She pushed herself hard during drills, but never gloated about outperforming others. She encouraged, observed, and stayed steady. Those actions carried more weight than any forced toughness because they came from a genuine place. She was not performing. She was simply being who she was trained to be. Her leadership was rooted in service, discipline, and responsibility. She did not need eyes on her to act like a leader. She acted like one even when no one paid attention. When the shove happened, the difference between character and intimidation became impossible to ignore. The cadet who pushed her acted out of insecurity, not strength. He wanted to assert control, but all he revealed was a lack of self-control. He thought that moment would prove his authority. Instead, it exposed his weakness. Leadership that relies on force collapses once people see through it. The shove was his attempt to climb higher by knocking someone else down. But real leaders do not climb by stepping on others. They climb by earning trust and demonstrating reliability, especially when things get tense. Her response in that moment highlighted the contrast. She did not react with aggression. She did not escalate the situation. She handled the fall with composure. She stood with calm, deliberate movement that showed control without theatrics. Her restraint carried more weight than any outburst could. It showed she understood the difference between power and ego. It showed that leadership is not about dominating others, but about leading yourself first. Her steadiness made the cadets realize that strength without discipline is just noise, and noise loses impact the moment someone shows real command. When she revealed her background, she did not use it as a weapon. She shared it as information, not leverage. That alone demonstrated character. She could have used her past to belittle the cadets who mistreated her. She could have humiliated them to make a point. She chose not to. Her goal was not revenge. Her goal was clarity. She wanted them to understand the standard, not fear her. That kind of restraint is something only true leaders understand. It takes maturity to hold power without flaunting it. It takes confidence to stay calm when others lose theirs. It takes character to correct a situation without breaking the people involved. The cadets began seeing leadership differently after that. They saw how she carried herself through pressure. They saw how she never used intimidation even when she had every right to. They saw how her actions aligned with her words, and how her presence shifted the atmosphere without a hint of force. They realized leadership is not about making others afraid, but about making them better. It is about creating trust, not tension. It is about showing people the standard through your behavior, not through threats. As training continued, her influence spread quietly. Cadets who once relied on intimidation began adjusting their tone. They watched how she handled conflict, how she kept her head clear, how she treated everyone with fairness. They started to understand that leadership built on intimidation collapses under pressure, but leadership built on character holds steady. They saw that the strongest person in the yard was not the loudest, not the most aggressive, not the one who demanded obedience. It was the one who carried herself with honor, patience, and purpose. Leadership defined by character lasts. Leadership defined by intimidation fades. She proved that without raising her voice once.